How's this? No, I don't like Somalis. I don't want them in my country, and they bring absolutely nothing of value here. And
The current rhetoric being said about Somali immigrants and citizens in the United States right now is almost bar for bar the exact same thing that was being said about the Irish in the mid 1800s. If you're familiar with the Native American Party, which was founded in 1844, or the Know Nothing Party, they were campaigning off of the premise that Catholic immigrants were going to replace American democracy with the Pope's rule. Because people are saying that Somali immigrants are dirty or garbage, according to the president, that they hate America, that they're trying to replace American values with anti American values, and that they have no culture, or they have a culture of piracy, violence, or degeneracy. And that is the exact same thing that was being said about Irish immigrants in the 1800s. You know Morse code? It was invented by Samuel Morse. Well, Morse wrote in 1835 in a tract called Foreign Conspiracy Against the Liberties of the United States that Irish Catholics wanted to destroy American liberty under the control of the Pope. In fact, Catholicism was considered incompatible with democracy at the time, and Irish Catholics were called the Pope's slaves, an ignorant, worthless race, and they're considered to have a culture of crime, vulgarity, drunkenness, and violence. The Know Nothing Party was saying the exact same things that you're saying just about Irish people. They said that Irish Catholics were hostile to the American way of life, that they were corrupting our democracy and voting in blocks under priestly command. This escalated into violence such as the Philadelphia Nativist riots of 1844 and Louisville's Bloody Monday of 1855. Now, naturally, today you don't say that about the Irish because it's just ridiculous. The Irish weren't coming to America to replace the president with the Catholic Pope. It's understood that the reason why the Irish were coming to America was because their country was being destabilized under British rule. If you're familiar with Somalia's story, it's quite similar. It was colonized by the British, the French, and the Italians for about 80 years. It was neglected in many ways, such as in infrastructure and education. There was forced labor, there was wealth extraction, and this eventually led to a civil war and the current state of affairs today. Right now, there's a diaspora of about 2 million Somali people, and about 250,000 of them are in the United States, but the majority of them aren't coming to the US. The majority of them are immigrating to countries such as Kenya, Djibouti, Yemen, and Ethiopia. The other thing that needs to be stressed is that you don't upend your entire life and move across the world to another country simply because you despise it. People coming to America aren't moving here because they hate America. If you know how difficult that process is, you surely wouldn't do that if you really didn't want to be here. There's also multiple ignorant claims being made right now that Somali people are more likely to commit crimes or fraud. Again, that was something that was said about the Irish, but if you truly care about fraud, you wouldn't be focusing on people based off of nationality or race. You would be focusing on different metrics because nationality and race does not indicate whether or not someone's going to commit fraud. This is likely because of the Feeding Our Future fraud case in Minnesota, about $250 million in alleged fraud with 78 defendants so far. I don't support that. That needs to be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. Yet, people claiming that this indicates that people from Somalia are more likely to commit fraud are largely just being racist because consider fraud in pure numbers, for instance. This is $250 million in damages. Do we say that all white people are likely to commit fraud because Rick Scott defrauded about $1.7 billion using the HCA in the 1990s? Do we claim that all people from Brooklyn are likely to commit fraud because Bernie Madoff defrauded people of about $18 billion? You can also look at the current president's meme coins. He launched 2 this year, one for himself, one for his wife, and they have collectively lost people about $2 billion in alleged pump and dump schemes. That all being said, what do you do about this rhetoric? Well, if you yourself are Somali American, I recommend using your voice while you still can. If you don't speak, someone else will speak for you, and it's important to use your voice and to speak loudly and clearly about what you believe and what you stand for. At the same time, this doesn't mean taking this completely seriously. I myself am being very serious right now, but I'm also seeing people post things like Minnesota was promised to Somalis 3,000 years ago, which I think is hilarious. And that sort of tactical frivolity is something that does actually lend a great hand towards undermining people who are trying to spread racist rhetoric. Now, if you're not Somali American, I recommend understanding that this rhetoric has been used before multiple times in the United States. It's a rhetoric where you target a specific or weak minority in order to gain a foothold politically speaking. It makes sense that they would go after immigrants from Somalia because Somalia is a rather poor country, just like last year when the president went after immigrants from Haiti, another very poor country. It's the same thing with fascism. First, they went after people like communists, Bolsheviks, and social democrats and trade unionists. Then they went after people with disabilities. And then they went after Jews and Roma. Then later gay people. And then later Jehovah's Witnesses. And then gradually, eventually, they're going after Polish nationals. And then they're invading Soviet Russia. It's the same thing with immigration. Republicans knew that it would be too unpopular for them to say that they were going to round up people in the streets using ICE. So they said that they were only going to go after violent criminals. Then they started going after non-criminals. They started going after workers. They started removing temporary protected status for hundreds of thousands of immigrants. They started targeting people in immigration courts, and they started going after citizens too.